I'm working through the finer details of my new home brewery, and today it's finally time to turn my attention to my kegerator. In this video, I'm upgrading my kegerator, and along the way, I'll give you 5 things to consider for your own kegerator setup. Now, having any kegerator at home is great. That's just a fact. But in my mind, there are 3 tiers of kegerators. The first tier is probably the most common option among home brewers. It's the Keezer. You take a chest freezer and add a wood collar, some taps, a temperature controller, and you're off to the races. The best thing about a Keezer is it's super easy to drop kegs into the top opening door, and these chest freezers are pretty easy to get a hold of for a decent price. But they're not without their flaws. They're hard to clean, they really don't look the best, and the biggest problem is the temperature at the bottom of the Keezer tends to be far lower than the temperature at the top. And while there are ways to combat this, I just want to throw this out there. A freezer will never out-fridge a fridge. Moving on, the next tier is a converted fridge. While there are many ways to pull this off, the idea is you take a fridge, add some taps, and you're good to go. If you do it right, this can be a bit of a sleeper option, and no one will even know you have a kegerator until you offer them something to drink. It's also a fridge, so it does all that fridge stuff really well without needing to use a temperature controller. Plus, just like the Keezer option, it's pretty easy to get a hold of a secondhand fridge for a decent price. There really are a lot of benefits to going this route, but you might run into issues getting kegs to fit well inside some refrigerators. A lot of times the compressor is at the very bottom of the fridge, and that makes it difficult to fit the kegs. Now, as we move up to the final tier, pretty much all of those issues I've mentioned go away. A purpose-built kegerator like the Komos kegerator I'm installing today is the best option you can choose, but of course, the top tier option comes at a top tier price. Again, having any kegerator at home is great. And as we dive deeper into this build, there are definitely more important things to consider. Now, big thanks to More Beer for sending this out. This is the Komos kegerator in the build your own configuration, which means I bought the tower and taps separately. But a ton of important parts were included with the kegerator. And this is the next thing you should consider. As you're comparing different kegerator options, make sure you think about what's included in the price. In this case, I got all the liquid and gas lines that I'm going to need, all the duo-tight fittings to connect everything together, a CO2 regulator, drip tray, casters. It comes with everything you need. And you can even get the tower and taps included as part of the kit. So make sure you're comparing apples to apples when you're shopping around. The next thing to consider is your lines. Vinyl tubing used to be more of an option, but these days, the best way to go is AVA barrier lines and duo-tight connections. If you're familiar with John Guest push-to-connect fittings, duo-tight is very similar. Just make sure you've got a clean, straight cut on the line, push it all the way into the fitting, and that's it. Nice and secure. For my kegerator, I'm using duo-tight at pretty much every connection point. So there's some that connect to the shank, some that screw onto my keg connections, even some that screw onto my gas manifold. I highly recommend using duo-tight for everything. And I'm sure some of you might have heard that they aren't reliable or they don't hold up to sanitizer or other cleaning products, but let me set the record straight. That was a much older version of duo-tight. These days, they're made out of a different material and they hold up just fine. The next thing to consider is how you're going to keep your draft lines cold. Warm draft lines will cause some serious problems that lead to wasted beer and just a poor experience for you and your guests. With the Komos kegerator, it actually has a built-in feature that sends cold air up the tower directly to the taps. How cool is that? Definitely the first time I've seen something like this, but it's not the only way to keep your draft lines cold. Another way is to go with a sleeper setup like this one, where the lines and even the taps are staying nice and cold inside the fridge. So far, we've talked about the kegerator itself, the included parts, the type of tubing or lines you use, and how you're going to keep your draft lines cold. The last thing to consider is your taps. Believe it or not all taps are created equally, and this is a very important component to consider. The most important thing to look for is a forward sealing tap, like this Nuka tap. What forward sealing means is the beer is cut off or sealed towards the tip of the faucet rather than the rear of the faucet. A rear sealing faucet leaves the whole tap empty of beer and vulnerable to bugs, microbes, and everything else. So definitely go for a forward sealing faucet like the Nuka tap, Intertap, or a Perlick tap. For my setup, I'll be using a combination of regular Nuka taps and flow control Nuka taps, which allow you to slow down the flow of beer to troubleshoot foaming. And finally, here's a little bonus. Make sure you consider your tap handles. Short black handles are included and make for a clean look, but I like to choose different handles for my collection depending on what's on tap. So there you have it, my new Komos kegerator with a 3-tap matte black tower and stainless Nuka tap faucets. If you're considering adding or upgrading a kegerator, make sure you consider the type of kegerator, the items included with the kit, the tubing or lines, how you keep those lines cold, and the taps. If you ask me, the most important things on this list are number 1, the lines, and number 2, the taps. Definitely go with AVA barrier tubing and duo-tight connections, and when you can afford it, upgrade your taps to something forward sealing. Of course, links to everything I showed are neatly organized down in the description of this video. My name's Dan, this is Hops and Gnarly. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I'll see you again soon.